Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we are talking with a photographer who's been doing a weekly photo project going on 7 years, and he has learned a ton. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Oh, welcome back to this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am your host, Raymond Hatfield, and I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be here. We have a great interview lined up for you today with photographer Simon Ringsmuth, who's been doing a weekly photo project for almost 7 years. Think about that for a second. Think about committing to just about anything for 7 years. And it's really impressive. So he's got a lot to share this week. But last week I teased of a new free live training webinar that I am doing called the 3 Secrets to Capturing Better Moments with the Camera Gear that you already have. And you've heard me say this before, moment matters most. Now, you can have an underexposed image or one with a poor composition, but if it has the moment, then you can look past most of what might be technically wrong with the photo. So in this live free training, I will be sharing some of my best strategies to capturing better moments with the camera gear that you already have. Nothing new to buy. So to be a part of this live training, there is a link to reserve your spot in the show notes of this episode. So if you are on Apple Podcast, all you got to do is swipe up, click it, or there is a link to the form on the homepage at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. It's just a banner up at the top. You will see the information. Just click on that, and then you can register right away. Now, when you sign up, you will get all of the details, and it is also the only way that you can get access to the replay of the training as well. So if you can't make it live, still sign up, and I will send you the link to the replay the very next day. So come join. Be sure to bring a pen and paper as well, as you will be taking a lot of notes. So, as I said, really excited for this one. It's going to be a ton of fun. And lastly, beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Click that link at the top of the page, the banner, and you can join. So this week, as I mentioned earlier, I interview Simon Ringsmuth. Now, Simon started a weekly photo project nearly 7 years ago and is still going strong. Still. Now, today we talk about what he has learned about photography in that time, some of the many challenges, how to deal with burnout, and a ton more. There is seriously a lot on offer in this one, just for you. Simon Ringsmuth, I'm very excited to be here with you today as somebody who is doing a weekly 50 photo project. This is it's a large undertaking. This isn't something that you just decide to do on a whim, or maybe it is something that you decide to do on a whim. We'll get into that. But this is something that takes tenacity. This is something that takes time and dedication to do. And this is something that I personally struggle with, all of those things. So today we're definitely going to be talking a lot about all of those issues, how to keep up with something like this, as well as the challenges. But before we do, can you let me know how you even got started in photography in the first place?
Thank you for asking, Raymond. It's a great question. So like a lot of photographers that I talk with, my start begins with my kids. And back in 2000, when was my oldest son born? I always have to think. So back in 2000, I know, in 2011, my son was born in July. And my wife and I at the time, we had a Panasonic ZS7. And I thought it was like a really good camera. This is a little pocket camera with a zoom lens like people used to have back in the day. And we thought that we spent like $200 on this pocket camera. We thought this is a professional grade camera. It's got a little dial to change from like A to P and M, and this must be awesome. And our photos of our son were just not that great. And we couldn't figure out why. And this was mobile phones. Like the iPhone was invented in 2007. So people had phone cameras, but they weren't that great. And I thought, well, maybe it's me. I'm not doing something right. But we didn't really understand what was going on. And then in the spring of 2012, my buddy Kevin came over, and he had a Nikon D200 with a 50 millimeter lens. And he took one picture of my son, who was just like learning to walk. So he was doing what they call cruising, where they're like walking along the edge of the furniture, holding their hands on the cushions. So my son was cruising along the edge of this table in our living room, this coffee table, and Kevin just takes a picture of this D200. And the D200 is not a fancy camera. It was made in like 2006. It's 10 megapixels. It has nothing in terms of modern features.
Yes.
But that one picture, I kid you not, Raymond, was like an epiphany where Kevin, with just a single frame, he showed me what he got. I put it on my computer and I was completely blown away. Like, how did you do that? What magic did you do to make that? Like in Lord of the Rings, there's a line where Gandalf, they're in like the mines of Moria, and Gandalf's like, what devilry is this? And I was like, what have you done? How did you make this picture? I want more. And he was like, it's prime lens, dude. It's all it is. Just f1.8 aperture. I was like, what is an aperture? I don't
what does
know
this even mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
All these words.
Yeah. So I spent the afternoon with Kevin, and he showed me a little bit about his camera. And I told my wife, I was like, we got to get one of these cameras. So we got a same thing. We got a Nikon D200. And before my son turned 1, so it was probably like May of that year, we had our own D200. And I was like, this is it. We have hit the big time. We got a D200, the 50 millimeter lens. I'm a professional photographer now. I know everything about photos. And immediately, like the quality was insane, from pocket camera to a 50 millimeter prime lens on an actual APS-C sensor.
Yes.
I didn't know what any of that meant. I just knew that I could make that dial go to 1.8. And my pictures were amazing.
And magic happened.
Yeah, it did. Magic happened. And so I took tons of pictures of my kid, and I would go out and like take pictures of flowers and stuff like everyone else would do. And then I realized, though, that I wanted to hold myself accountable for taking more pictures. And I noticed that I took hundreds and hundreds of pictures right when my son was born, and then it kind of fell off.
Levels off.
Yeah. And I thought, well, I need to hold myself accountable. Maybe I'll join like a photo group on Flickr or something. I didn't know what. And I went to this. This sounds really cheesy when I tell this story, but at work, I work on a college campus, and they did one of these motivational speakers. Who comes in and they're like firing the crowd up, like, you can achieve your dreams, you can do anything. And for some reason, when I left that session, I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a website, and I'm going to do one photo per week. I'm going to call it Weekly 50, because I have a 50 millimeter lens. That was the only camera, the only lens I had. So that week in like February or March of 2013, I went online, I bought weekly50.com, the domain name, and set up a WordPress site.
Nice.
And exactly. And I started doing one photo a week. And that was in the spring of 2013. And we're now in the spring of 2020. And I still do it every week. I post a photo. And originally it was just, and even today, it still is just for me. I do it to hold myself accountable, to make sure I'm using my camera so it doesn't just sit on the shelf. Now I've got 2 kids, and one's turning 9 and the other's 6. And I still take pictures of my kids, but I want to grow beyond that.
Yeah.
And continually use my gear to make photos and learn from that. And I've tried daily projects, and it doesn't work for me. I always drop off after a couple weeks. But that's how I got started in Weekly 50. And then since then, that site has well, okay. So that's the answer to your question. I don't want to get too far ahead. So that's my very long answer to your question, Raymond.
Well, that's good. That's good that you stopped there, because I actually had questions along the way, and
Oh, good. Okay.
you were kind of going along that timeline, which is great. And I think, as you said, so many. I know so many personally, as well as so many listeners, don't pick up that camera until they have their child and they realize,
That's a
oh,
common
now I
thing.
have something worth photographing. I want to
Yeah,
capture
yeah.
this. So you had that camera. It wasn't until your buddy, was it Kevin, who came
Yep,
over?
Kevin.
It wasn't
Thanks,
until Kevin
Kevin.
came over, yeah, and took that one photo that you thought, oh my gosh, magic has just happened.
Mm-hmm.
So you went out, you bought this D200, you bought this 50 mil 1.8, that nifty 50.
Mm-hmm.
When you first started, what was it that you struggled with most?
I knew that there was letters on the camera that did things, but I didn't know how to make my camera do things that I thought it could do. And so I knew that you could put it in letter A mode, and that then if you went in letter A, you could make it go all the way to 1.8. But what about letter S? What does S mean? What does M mean? And M was like, I don't want to go there because that's really complicated. You got to be like a real professional. I didn't understand how to use. I didn't know, like, why doesn't everyone have a 50 millimeter lens? 50 millimeter lens is perfect. Well, no, it's actually not. There's a lot of lenses you can get. So I think when I first got that initial camera and lens, I think I suddenly saw like how much I didn't know, and I didn't know how much I didn't know until I made that first jump. And I remember sitting there with the D200 going through every option and every button, trying to figure out, what does this do? I know it's here somewhere. This is here for a reason, but I don't understand it. And it was really frustrating for me. And over time, I've learned to figure that stuff out. And I've learned a lot more about all this since then. But that was really difficult for me at first. I felt like I was in a desert and there's an oasis, and I just can't quite drink from it yet because I don't know how to get there. And I can see it, but I don't know what to do with my camera. Why is it not making the pictures? We went out to do, my buddy Ryan was like, you should try panning. And I'm like, oh, well, it's panning, I'm all for it. And he showed me some pictures where he took pictures of his son riding a bike, and the background's all blurry, but his son is crystal clear. And so we went out, my wife and I went out with our son, and we were like trying to take some panning pictures, and nothing was working. I was like so frustrated. Why isn't this working? My camera's at 1.8. That's what you should do, right?
That's
Everything's
the magic number.
That's not at all what you do for panning. I didn't know that. I didn't know how to control ISO to get like when is it appropriate to shoot at higher ISO. I didn't understand how much I didn't know until I really got that taste with that initial camera acquisition.
So then for you, did your education purely come from Guess and Check, or was there other, was it tutorials, was it books? What was your main source of photography education?
That's a good question. I started reading a lot of online stuff. A lot of, like, if I just start rattling off some names, some YouTubers, I remember I went to Ken Rockwell's site because he's done a brilliant job of SEO, of like building his site up. Some people like him, some don't. Well, I started with his, and I started with Jared Polin, that YouTube guy, Mike Brown, another YouTuber. And I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and then I would try and replicate what I read and what I saw. And I started going to the Reddit photography forum and reading posts there. And I never had formal training in any of this, but I realized that making myself use my camera was so I don't want to say like you shouldn't get a photography education. I wish I had got a photography education. I play guitar now, and I played since I was in high school. I wish I had taken lessons because I'd be way better than I am now. But because I was married, working full time, my wife works full time. We had kids. I'd never got a formal photography education, so a lot of it was like trial and error and continually using my camera. And the Weekly 50 project has been the constant throughout all this that has forced me to continually use that camera to try new things. And it's sort of like my platform to share my stuff. So let's say I take a picture of the neighbor's dog or something. What do I do with that? I could post it to Instagram, or I could just post it to, I could post it to Instagram and Weekly 50. And on Weekly 50, I get to write a little bit about it and explain a little audio clip about it. So that was like one of the ways in which I grew the most, was simply by having this website as a way of holding myself accountable for continually learning.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into the whole website aspect of things, because in some way it acts kind of like a journal,
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. But what I find interesting is, or that I want to know, last year, no, I take that back. 2 years ago, I started doing, I don't know if you've heard of the app called 1 Second a Day.
I have. Yeah. My brother, Tom, if you're listening, Tom uses that app, and he has encouraged me to try it as well. And one of these years I will, but
it's fun. It's fun. It's fun. I mean, there's not really much to it. It's fun to look back on. Right. But I find, when it comes to photography, very rarely do I look back on my photos. Every once in a while, I'll find an old photo on my hard drive and think to myself, oh, wow, like I remember that day.
Yeah.
Wow, I can really tell that, my skills have grown since then. But when I watch 1 Second a Day, which I do more often, I'm more critical of these things. So how often, I know that you're documenting your photos every week, but is there a review process where you go back in time and you look at those photos to see where you're at now?
That's yes and no. It's not what I'd say a formal process, but what I find myself doing more than I thought I would is revisiting themes. So one of the photos that I took years and years ago was a photo of some tiny yellow flowers, crocuses, coming up in our front yard. And I, like I did back then, f1.8, dial it out as far as you can. And this one flower was in focus and the rest were not. And I was like, this was a professional photo. Look at me. And then I find myself revisiting compositions like that and taking the initial idea and seeing like, what else can I do with that? And over the years, I posted a couple similar photos where it's the same idea, even the same flower. And if I look right here, I can see out my window where I took these flower pictures. But I just like a month ago, I took another photo, yellow crocus coming up out of the ground, and it was way different. And in my opinion, way better than that one I took years ago. But it was absolutely inspired by that one years ago. And I could tell, and I can explain clearly what I've learned since then.
Yeah.
And my compositional choices that I made now versus back then, and how I edited. So I shoot a lot in RAW now, whereas before it was JPEG. And so like, why do I shoot in RAW? What advantage does that give me when I'm editing? What editing choices do I make? And so there's a lot of reflection that goes into when I'm taking photos now, simply because there's been this buildup over time. And if it was just my kids and my family, so a lot of people take photos of the people in their lives, as do I, and I think that's great. But I don't engage in the same sort of creative reflection with those photos as I do with my Weekly 50 photos. So when I look back, like when you said you go back to your hard drive and you see like an old photo and you think that's really cool. I do that too, but I find with my Weekly 50 photos, that's where I grow creatively the most, because I start to think, well, what choices did I make here? And then how can I expand on those choices here? Whereas with my kids, I'm usually like trying to just catch them in a moment of whatever they happen to be doing, but there's not a lot of like compositional thought that goes into those compared to my Weekly 50 photos.
Yeah, I feel like with kids, whenever I'm photographing the kids and I go through to cull the images, as long as it's like in focus and maybe like they have a funny face, like that's it. I'm gonna keep the photo.
Mark it as pick in Lightroom and
yeah, exactly. Whereas I will go through a million photos of a wedding and think to myself, like, these are all garbage. Like even if even if they're good from a compositional standpoint or something like that. So yeah, I'm with you there.
Well, And you shoot weddings, and it's been interesting how when we started this, when I rewind the clock to 2012, when we got that D200, I had no ambitions of doing anything professionally at all. But what I found is that Weekly 50 made me a better photographer, so that when I had the opportunity to do more professional work, I knew what I was talking about more, and I knew I knew how to control my camera to get what I wanted of those pictures. So just last a month or two, no, it was like 3 weeks ago, I did a high school senior photo session, and because of Weekly 50, those photos were better. And I knew more, and I've done a lot of you'd say professional. To me, it's like a side gig, because I'm my full-time job is at Oklahoma State University, and I make a little bit of side income doing family, high school photo, like senior photos, child photos. I make a little bit of side income each year doing that. So it's not a profession, but when I do those photos for clients, it is absolutely 100% better because of my continual practice through Weekly 50.
I love how this passion project is turning into something that is lending its skills into more of a professional sense. That's very exciting. That must feel awesome when you're in that situation, and you think to yourself like, oh, I remember taking a photo that was similar to this. This is how I can make it better. Is that the feeling that you get?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's been interesting to see this project. And so I like to kind of step back a little bit. I know there's a lot of photographers who do some type of photo project, like a 365 project, like one photo a day for a year, or the 1 second a day. And I think if you have a project that works for you, then absolutely do it. There's no one on the internet can tell you that your project is not valid. For me personally, this Weekly 50 project has been the one thing that has worked more than anything else, but it may or may not work for anyone else. For me, doing this Weekly 50 has it has led to a lot of these things because of that reflection element, because I'm constantly going back and thinking, like, what did I do here? How can I take this type of photo in a similar way, or how can I put something into practice? So we were at every summer we go to this lake in Kansas with my family, and we were there this summer, and I brought a tripod and a little cable release. And I had my Fuji X100F, which is, in my opinion, like one of the greatest cameras of all time. Had that camera with me, and I used that as a way to experiment with things that I had read about, like long exposure photography, where I'm doing 15-minute exposures as the sun has gone down. What does that look like? And because I had Weekly 50 as my reason to do that, then it gave me, like, it helped me learn more about what it means to do a long exposure. And I'd read all this stuff, and now I thought, well, I can practice this, and then I can share that on Weekly 50. Even if no one reads it, I've now done this little mini project of long exposure experimenting photography, and I have a platform to share it on. And I could put it on Instagram, and I do put it on Instagram, but for some reason it feels a little more personal to do it on a website, my own website.
Yeah, I bet that it would feel like a lot less comparison. Like you're not also looking at other people's photos as you're uploading your own photos.
That's exactly right. I don't compare it. I'm only comparing it to myself. And if other people want to share their photos, they're welcome to in the comments. But yeah, it's like running cross country. My wife ran cross country in high school, and she would say the only person you're really competing against is yourself, because you're trying to get your next personal best or personal record. And that's when I'm on Instagram, I'm just scrolling through, and I'm like you said before, man, my photos are junk.
Yeah.
Look at all these other pictures that everyone's sharing. Everyone's having a great time. Everyone's going exotic places. My photo's just lost in the shuffle. But when I put on Weekly 50, it's just me. Yeah. And other people can look at them if they want to, and hopefully they get something out of it. But I do it for me, and that's my way of keeping that spirit alive, I guess, where I don't have to compare it to anyone else. So it's a really gratifying feeling.
Yeah, I think obviously finding the right reason to do it is going to be very important to the longevity of a project like this. And with something like Weekly 50, where for you kind of knew, at least from the sounds of it, you knew that it didn't have an end date, that this was going to be something that continued on and continued on.
Yeah.
Me, as well as more than 200 others in the Beginner Photography podcast, there is a Facebook group. We're all doing a daily photo challenge right now. But when you do a 365, I have found that now I'm not consciously looking forward to day 366 or whatever it is this year. But in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, on that day, I'm going to have to ask myself that question. Am I going to continue with this, or am I done? Did I complete the challenge? And I've already felt burnout, like, at times.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, at times, especially now when it's like, well, we're home. And I think it's just because I'm not pushing myself as far as I need to. So with you, having a project that doesn't have an end date, for doing this for now more than 7 years, how do you protect yourself from burnout?
So the number one way in which and burnout is real. I have felt burnout before, and that's been my main issue with shorter interval photo projects, like a photo a day. A while ago on Facebook, there was this theme going around where, like, for 1 week, post a black and white photo, and I did it for 2 days, and I was like, oh no, I forgot on the third day. And then I get these guilt feelings, like,
yes,
I forgot a day.
Yeah,
I'm no good.
Am I doing this anymore? Should I just give up?
Yeah, I know. So for me, the saving grace with Weekly 50 has been, I don't take a photo every week. I post a photo every week. And that has made all the difference, because I can go, I might take in one day, like 5 or 6 interesting photos. So let's say I drive to, my family is in Nebraska. So let's say I'll drive to Nebraska, and I'll take the back highways, like Highway 15 through Kansas, and I'll stop half a dozen times along the way to take photos of windmills or whatever. And so in one day, I've just amassed like 5 or 6 potential photos for Weekly 50. I schedule those on the website. So now I've got a month and a half of photos that are already scheduled out. So now I don't have to think about it. And it removes all of that stress of having to do that project. So I haven't felt any sort of obligation to my photo project in a long time, because it's just there. It's like low grade background hum. And yesterday it was nice out. We're stuck inside like everyone is right now, and it was a nice day. So I went out and I got I have a set of close-up filters that let you do like fake macro photography. So I took some macro photos of buds coming off of plants and like flowers and stuff. And I didn't felt pressure, like, I need to take these photos because I need a photo for tomorrow's website posting. I was just like, I'm going to take these photos because it's a cool photo to take. Put them on Weekly 50, and they're going to go live in like 2 months. And knowing that I've got this huge cushion has made all the difference, because it removes all that feeling of obligation. It doesn't become a burden. It's not a stressor. And when you look down and you think, well, gosh, 2 months, that's a long time. Like, I can't wait that long I want people to see my photo now. I've learned that it does happen. The 2 months will get here. I just need to be patient. And one cool thing is, I don't even know what gets published anymore. Every Wednesday, something gets that's exactly what happens. I woke up this morning or yesterday morning, because today's Thursday, and I have email notifications when my blog publishes every Wednesday. I publish a picture, and I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember taking that photo. That was a cool photo. But it's a surprise to myself even. And the fact that I can schedule them so far in advance takes care of so many things about the issues that I personally have had with photo projects. It's been a huge blessing to be able to have that, instead of the Instagram, where if I post a photo on Instagram, I'm checking back 3 minutes later. How many likes did it have? Does it have any comments? I'm checking back like an hour later. Well, then a day goes by and it's done. You'll never get anything after a day. And I find myself when I'm on Instagram, I'm more stressed because I'm comparing all my photos and I'm no good. And look what everyone else is doing. Didn't get enough likes. And it's just not Instagram is great. People, I'm not ragging on it, but for me, doing it on the Weekly 50 website has just made a huge difference.
I can see that there's been a big shift, obviously, just in the way that we as humans have been sharing photos. For years. It went from, you'd have to wait several days to get your photos developed. And then I remember, I wasn't around, I think, before 1 hour photo option, but growing up, I remember how I cannot believe that we have to wait a full hour for these photos. Like, I cannot wait to see them. And now, over the span of history, in a relatively short timeline, that will never be an issue again. We can take a photo and have it shared to literally millions of people in the matter of seconds.
Yeah.
But being able to kind of take that step back and reflect on our own photos, like you're saying here, is something that I think personally gets missed a lot, and that I've been trying to do more of this year in 2020, doing less Instagram, which I didn't think was possible because I really am not that active on Instagram as is. It's funny, I was actually looking at my my recommended photos on Instagram the other day, and it was nothing but like a M6, and then like a Subaru STI, and then like slices of pizza being pulled apart. There was like ooey cheese. Yeah. And I was like, none of these photos are, nothing here is like artistic. These are just somehow Instagram knows exactly what I'm interested in, and it showed those photos. But when I look at my photos and when I'm trying to figure out how I can incorporate ways to do what you have done, essentially, and slow down with my photography and appreciate it more, I'm struggling with that.
Yeah.
So the way that you're sharing, how it has worked for you is really exciting to me. And this is one place where I think that a lot of new photographers kind of get stuck, right? It's like, you have to share to Instagram. You have to share to TikTok. You got to share to all these places. So back 2013, we'll go way back to then, right? There's a lot of conflicting information given to new photographers. What was some of that common info that you were being taught that maybe you didn't find helpful?
So I think I didn't know what to focus on. I felt like there was a lot of information and a lot of recommendations coming at me, and you need to have your gear isn't good enough, or your lens isn't good enough. You need this lens. And I remember I got my 50 mil and I was like, this is perfect lens. And then I started reading people on online forums were talking about how a 35, if you're on an APS-C size sensor, 35 is really what you want. So I actually bought a 35, and now I have two lenses. Now I got to decide which one do I want to use. And now we're adding layers of burden onto what's supposed to be just a fun hobby. So now, like, I want to go take a picture. Do I take the 35 or the 50? Maybe I take them both, but now I got to switch between the lenses. Maybe I need another camera. So then I got at the fall of 2013, I got a D7100, and I thought, well, this is it. This is like I don't need any more cameras. I got two cameras, two lenses. And pretty soon I found myself getting an 85 1.8. So now I have 3 prime lenses. Then I got a D750. Like, the gear kept on coming. And so I think I listened too much to the chatter about gear, and it's your gear isn't good enough, and you need this mirrorless camera now because DSLRs are dead, and you need this and you need this. And I like to say that Weekly 50 or having photography has been a good hobby for me because it's all paid for itself. Doing Weekly 50, there's every week I write several paragraphs. And so that writing actually landed me a job at digitalphotographyschool.com. And I've been a contributor there for many years now. And I was able to use Weekly 50 as a way of demonstrating my writing skills. And so I've been writing columns for that, plus work on the side doing high school and senior and family photos. So I've gotten this side income, and it keeps getting put back into photo stuff. So I've gotten more lenses and more stuff over the years, but I didn't understand how that can become too big of a focus. And it really did. I went through this period where I was like, I need this and I need this. And I would just go online. Like I'm going to read reviews of these cameras that I can't afford. And I'm a Nikon guy, but everyone's going to Sony. Maybe I'm doing it all wrong. Or now Canon's coming out with their mirrorless line, and like, oh my goodness, I did everything wrong. Cut through all that. And at the end of the day, if you're taking photos that you like, then who cares?
Yeah.
If you're happy with it, then do it. And coming to that realization that it isn't about what people on the internet think, because they don't even know me. It's about what works for me as a photographer. That's kind of the key. And Weekly 50 has been the way that I have, it's like my constant. If anyone out there is a fan of the show Lost, there's one part where Desmond has a constant. Weekly 50 is like my constant, that it's always there, kind of reminding me that you can take it slow, take it easy. You don't need fancy gear, and just take photos that you like. And it's been really good and really freeing to have that. So I know that's kind of a long answer to was probably a simple question, but
No. First of all, I just want to say that I think that was the first Lost reference, and I greatly appreciate it. That was fantastic. We missed too many of those. The show it's right at that age to where people don't really talk about that often, but
yeah,
it's still very well known. So I appreciate that. That was
good.
Great. That was great.
Good.
No, and I love that answer. Thinking about switching systems. Podcast listeners know that I switched years ago from Canon actually strictly to Fuji, and I struggled with that as well because technically I'm downgrading, right? My sensor size is getting smaller.
A crop sensor camera now.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
And I remember the struggle that I had before I hit that pay with PayPal button, wondering, what am I doing? Like, am I still even a professional if I'm not shooting on a full frame sensor? Yeah, it was these ridiculous things. And like you said, I mean, I think ultimately it came down to, if you can produce images that you're happy with, who cares?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that Fuji does that better for me than what Canon does. So, there's pros and cons, but in this case, I don't see the con as a con at all, I guess.
Yeah, you're gaining a lot in some ways by switching to Fuji, and that's it lets you make the images you want to make. And if someone else has a different camera, then that works for them. And so
exactly.
I'm all about that. People ask me a couple times a year, friends or family will email me and they'll say,
what camera should I buy?
What camera should I buy? And I'm always like, what do you want to take? What pictures are you trying to take? Travel? Get yourself a Micro Four Thirds. Kids, get yourself a T7i or a Sony RX100 Mark 7 or something. But it always starts with, what pictures do you want to take? Maybe your mobile phone is what you want to use. And for me, the big difference in getting that initial rush, when you get that camera and you're like, everything is beautiful. Look, there's a pen on my desk. I'm going to take a brilliant photo of it. Look, there's a cup. Then a week or two later, you're like, oh, I don't have any ideas. Getting over that was almost entirely due to having that Weekly 50 as the reason. And of course, like, my kids are the reason that I do so much in life, and my wife. And so I take pictures of them, but I really wanted to continue to learn and grow. And that's what the website made possible. And I wouldn't be where I am today without that constant background hum of having this continual project. And I don't know. I don't like to make recommendations about anything, even movies, because I never know what people are going to like, especially on camera systems. No, because I don't want to be responsible if you don't like your camera. But it's, if someone out there is wondering, like, how can I grow as a photographer, especially I'm stuck inside right now, what can I do? That'd be my recommendation, is take on some sort of photo project that doesn't demand a sacrifice of your time, or doesn't make you feel bad if you don't hit the deadline. And something like a weekly photo project might just be what some listeners are looking for.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of wanted to actually circle back on that. We got off track there with Lost, and I was happy about it. But it reminded me that I had a question, which was, if you are scheduling out your posts, say 2 months in advance, what is it that's still driving you to continue to take photos if you don't have that pressure of needing to create something? Does that question make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Yes. There are some weeks where I don't take any weekly 50 photos, and just like as a tangent, the blog started as weekly 50. That was the only lens I had. I now have other lenses, other cameras, and on any given photo might be taken with any given camera lens. So it's called weekly 50, but it's whatever I happen to shoot with. So it's really been freeing for me to release myself from the bonds of the 50 millimeter focal length. But I still do the photos. I think it's almost like when you have a lot of food in your pantry, you still go grocery shopping. So you might have, like, you open your pantry and you got a shelf and it's got like some macaroni and cheese, it's got some pasta sauce, you got all these things, but you still have a shopping list. Mm-hmm. So you still have to go shopping because you don't want to get to zero. And you're not, generally day to day, you're not like freaking out, like, we're out of food, I need to go shopping now, because you have that backlog of food in your pantry. But yet you still know that if you don't go shopping every week or 2 weeks or whatever your schedule is, that food's going to run out. And because you've built up that padding, you're okay, but you still need to be keeping that in mind. Like, it's in there somewhere in the back of your mind. Like, we do need to get peppers or whatever. So that's helped me when I'm just going on a walk with my wife and kids. I'll take the camera with me sometimes, and I'll just kind of be on the lookout for a photo opportunity, because that background, there's a small voice in the background going, remember your weekly 50 photos. Yeah. Don't forget, just a friendly reminder. And there's been creative slumps where I'm not doing anything, and I don't feel like I'm growing at all as a photographer. And so what I do then is I just take crappy photos, and I'll post them to the blog. In fact, the one that went live yesterday, this is April 2nd, the one that went live yesterday, I don't even like that photo. It's a bad photo, but I took it because I wanted to continue to use my camera. And so on the explanation for the post, I explained why it's not really my favorite photo and why I took it anyway. And even when I'm in a creative slump, even just taking a couple photos is often enough to kind of kickstart things a little bit and get me out of that. Then I'm honest with myself. Like, I'm not chasing likes on Instagram, and I'm not trying to be an influencer. I'm just doing this for myself. And this is a crummy photo, but I know that. And I'm going to tell my listeners that on Weekly 50 and my readers that. And now and the sun still comes up the next day. So that's kind of how I deal with that. And particularly taking a lot of photos at once. When I was a kid, the TV show I watched when I was a kid was Full House.
Oh, yes.
And you remember that show too?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. And I used to think, well, they must have, they must really be rigorous about this if they're recording an episode every single week. And their Christmas episode, like, how do they get people to show up to record an episode on Christmas? Yeah. It's Christmas Day, yeah, and they're all gathered around opening presents. How do they do that? And I had no idea that they just recorded a bunch and then scheduled them out.
Back in like July.
Right. It wasn't snowing. Yeah, it's potato flakes or something. So having that mindset has really helped deal with that that issue of like, what do I do when I feel like there's nothing to photograph, or I feel like I just don't have any sort of creative spark. I don't take any photos for a while, or I take some crummy photos, but it's all part of that photographic journey that we're all on that really does have no end.
You know what I loved most about that whole thing is that obviously it sounds like you're doing it for, you love photography is
Yeah,
what it comes down to.
it's safe
You
to
love
say that, yeah.
photography. You know, you're doing this because you simply love photography. I also loved your shopping analogy there, like still going to the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm slightly worried that here in 5 or 10 years, when everybody exclusively eats using Uber Eats and nobody ever goes to the store
Oh,
anymore,
no.
that people
No,
are
you're
going to be
right.
wondering, what does that mean when they're
What's a
listening
grocery
back to this?
store?
Yeah. What? Why would you go to a store and get food?
Right.
That's gross.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. So, but I do want to talk a little bit about, because I just saw your 2019 wrap-up video. So obviously you've been doing this for years,
Mm-hmm.
but you posted a video on your YouTube where you did a 2019 wrap-up video where you talked kind of about your feelings of 2019 and going through this project. But then you talked about going forward into 2020 and that you want to explore more of what you can do with the gear that you have. You didn't know what that was going to look like, but you were going to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So how's that going so far?
You know, yesterday I was out with my D7100 and the same 50 millimeter lens that I got in 2012. And
Wow.
that to this day, that still is there is so much about that combination that you can do. And so I was taking pictures of my kids playing in the yard. And I was experimenting with aperture. So if I go to 1.8, how's that going to look versus 2.8 versus 4? I was out taking macro photographies of flowers, and I think it's going pretty well so far. Learning that there's a lot that I can do with what I have, and I don't need anything fancy. In fact, going back to that very first lens, it's really been nice because I get to revisit some ideas that I had back then that I didn't know how to do. And now I know how to do, or at least know more about looking for where the light's coming from.
Oh, yeah.
Or looking for what, like, before I take this picture, what is my subject? And do I have anything in the frame that's going to detract from my subject? What emotions am I trying to convey? And so with my 2020 eyes, looking back on my 2013 ideas, my photos from back then, and literally the same gear I had, I'm finding creative new ways to use that. So it's actually going pretty well. And it's interesting you bring up the YouTube thing. I started maybe 2 years ago going back to the entire archive of Weekly 50 and putting every photo along with every audio commentary on YouTube, just as a way of getting it out to people, because there's a lot of people who consume content on YouTube. And I thought, well, if people want to see my photos there, I should make that available to them. Mm-hmm. And every week I have the same photo gets published on my website and on YouTube, and there's no difference in the content. But it has been interesting to see a different audience, I guess, on YouTube. Yeah. And there's people who comment every single week. One guy in particular, D Welker, D, if you're listening, thank you for your comments. Whereas there's people on the blog who comment. So it's two different audiences, but it's been really neat to get things out. And full disclosure, I am not a successful YouTuber. In fact, you have to have a 10-minute video to even be monetized on YouTube. Every one of my videos is like 3 minutes long, so I can't make money on YouTube. I think I have all of 120 subscribers, so I don't do it for the numbers. I just do it as another way to get photos out there to people. And it's the primary way is the website. And even on YouTube, there's a link every week that directs you back to my website. And websites are now in 2020, they're like snail mail. Nobody goes to websites. It's all
no, that's not true at all. That is not true at all. That is unequivocally false. So many people go to websites. I don't know what you're talking about. I understand what you're talking about the fragmentation of content, certain videos. You know, I mean, there are YouTubers who make a living strictly off YouTube and don't even have a website. So I get what you're saying there.
Yeah.
But people still definitely go to websites. And me personally, I've obviously I've checked out the YouTube. I've checked out the website. The website is a much more almost in the same sense that we were talking about Instagram earlier. When you go to Instagram, and I found this only from having kids and watching how they navigate through YouTube. When you go on YouTube, you almost are always looking for what's next. Like, ooh, but like, what's the next video? Like,
Yeah.
what's the better video that I'm going to find after
Look at these
this?
recommendations on the side.
Exactly. Like look at all this opportunity right here. It could be an amazing video. I just have to find it. Whereas when you go to a website, you definitely slow down because the content that is there in front of you is simply the content that is there in front of you, and that's what it is. So when we're looking at things artistically, I love to have as many barriers in front of me as possible to slow me down because we do live in a fast-paced world, you know?
That's
and even though you can get the
yeah.
exact same thing from YouTube, it's an entirely different experience to view it. So
Yeah, I agree.
don't shut
100%.
down the website is what I'm saying.
Yeah. and I think if someone is out there thinking about their own photo project, I'm never going to say don't use Instagram, don't use Facebook or whatever the social platform is that you, but there's a lot to be said from having control over the top to bottom, the whole experience. And you go to Wix or Weebly or WordPress, these are great platforms to start a website. And if you want a little more control, you pay a little money, but you don't even need to do that. Or Squarespace, I had a Squarespace site for a while for my side gig as my semi-professional stuff. But if you want that level of control, and I really like what you said about having barriers when it comes to creative outlets, because I find the same thing to be true.
Yeah.
There's some tech sites that I follow, and I'll go to YouTube and I'm always like, this video is pretty good, but that one might be better.
Exactly.
And so then if I go to the website of that content creator, I really do find myself engaging more richly with what they have to offer. And I think it's really important that we, as consumers of creative art or consumers of art, that we find ways to slow down as we process the images. And Instagram, it's great, but you scroll down, you scroll down, you scroll down. And you don't engage with the content typically for more than just a second or two. But on a website, you can do that in a lot more thoughtful, richer way. So I absolutely think that if someone's trying to think about starting a project, I always recommend one photo a week, and start a website, not necessarily an Instagram account or a Facebook page. There's a lot to be said for just making a website. It really does make a difference.
It's funny. I was actually watching a YouTube video this morning of Joe Greer. Do you know who Joe Greer is?
I've heard that name, but I don't know.
He is strictly a film shooter, but his notoriety, I guess, started all on Instagram. He built a very large following just of his film photos. But I was listening to a talk that he had. It wasn't this. I listened to it this morning, and he said that in the beginning, brands would come to him and try to do some sort of collaboration purely based upon his following. And he thought to himself, like, but if this goes away, then so does all of my work. If Instagram is gone, so is all of my work and all of my opportunities to make money, and we have to go somewhere else and we have to do something else. So even though he had something that was very successful for him, he still did the exact same thing and started a website, and even said that making photo books is like his dream. All that he wants to do is just shoot for himself and then just make those photo books.
That's a great idea.
I think that's just another one of those barriers. So for you doing a weekly project, is there anything that you do after you post the photo? Do you print books? Do you share your photos in any way to I don't know, keep them alive, if that makes sense?
We've got a couple hanging up in the house, and one or two of them might have made their way into like a family photo album, but no, they pretty much stay on the website. And I've been told, like, some people will say every now and then, like, you got to print this picture. And I guess it's just one of those things that I'll get around to it someday. Oh. And no, I know. And I really should. I should print more of this stuff. And my friend Shane, he has pictures that he'll just wait till there's a sale on a canvas print, and he'll just get that free 11 by 17 or whatever the sale happens to be, and he'll just get a picture made. And I always think like, it's got to be really good if you're going to picture made. Well, no.
You were just saying about the whole website. You
I
posted a photo
know.
that you don't even like.
I
You know.
know.
You have to print it. In fact,
Yeah.
after this is over, I'm gonna send you a YouTube video of how you can make how you are going to make a photo book in like 10 minutes or less, and you're going to get a year's worth of photos printed. It's super
I will
easy.
do that.
Good. I'm excited for you. I would love to see this.
That. I appreciate that. Thank you.
There's something totally different about, when a photo is printed. So
well, we've made yearbooks where we just go through and take like 500 or 600 pictures from the year 2012 and 2013 and put them in a book. And when we have nieces and nephews over, they like looking through those photo books a lot more than they like to scroll through photos on the computer. And there's like this sense of I don't know, it's like a tangible sense that you get looking through physical photo books or physical prints of photos, and you're holding something in your hands. And there's a lot to be said for that. And I don't know that I've ever thought about doing that with my weekly 50 photos, but I think I'm going to. So
that would literally be the easiest thing.
It would, yeah. I've already got all the photos. They're already there. So, and incidentally, I actually host my photos on Flickr. If you go to Flickr, which Flickr's like the unsung hero of the modern digital photography world. Flickr has been there for so long, and they're one of the biggest photo sharing sites. They're not as popular in like the if you just ask someone what's a popular photo sharing site, Instagram comes up, others come up, but Flickr is huge. Mm-hmm. People don't realize how huge Flickr is, even today. So all my photos are actually on Flickr, and they're full resolution on Flickr. So on my website, when you see the photos, it's actually pulling them from Flickr to embed them into the website. And if you want to see the full resolution version, you just click the photo and it takes you straight to Flickr. And you can see all of my weekly 50 photos right there, and you just scroll through them. You don't get all the commentary and everything else, but you get all the images. And so the reason I like that is on a website, it will typically show you, it will give you like a lower resolution or a smaller size version of a photo to fit the dimensions of your screen. And you might have to like right click and say open image in new tab to see the full thing. But if you click through to the ones on weekly 50, it'll take you to Flickr, and you can download them. You can see them full resolution if you want to. So I've really appreciated that aspect of it, of using Flickr as like the medium for storing and transferring the photos, and it's been a great thing.
Yeah, I would imagine the amount of technical things that you have to go through to get something like this to work is quite a bit. And I definitely need to spend more time on Flickr. I'm not sure why I don't really. Maybe it's just because there's not as much discoverability as there is in something like Instagram, or I don't know. Anyway, you've been very gracious with your time. I got one last question for you. Are you still up for it?
I'm up for it.
After 7 years of shooting, what's something that you learned within that time that you think others would be surprised to hear?
I've learned that there's the cliches like gear doesn't matter, and you can take photos even if you have an old film camera with no autofocus and all that. I've learned that inspiration takes work, and yes, you can go and find a picture in your backyard, but if you really want to get a great picture of that photo, you got to practice it. And yeah, you can put a filter on your, you can take a photo with your camera and put some color filters on. But if you see a good picture on Weekly 50 and you think like, wow, this is a really good picture, this guy knows what he's doing, I promise you there's 100, 1,000 photos that are not that great that I didn't put on Weekly 50. And the one I did put, if you think it's a good photo, there's a lot of thought that went into that photo, even if it's just learning over time. So maybe I didn't study that composition for an entire hour, but if I took a photo that was that you thought was interesting and that I think is interesting, I'm drawing on 7 years of experience and learning what didn't work to make that happen. So I used to have like a masthead at the top of the website, and it was this photo of a butterfly in the dew, and there was like the sun rays were coming in, and it's one of my photos that I'm most proud of. That took a ton of work, even knowing what time of day to go out to get that photo, and knowing the angle that I should shoot it at, the correct aperture to get the image I was looking for. And I think it would surprise people to know the amount of work, mental work, and even some degree of post-processing that it takes to get those really good shots. And yes, you can walk around your neighborhood and be inspired, and I do that. But what you want to do is walk around your neighborhood 100 times and be taking photos, but then be comparing photos to your earlier photos, not to others on Instagram, but to your own past work, and really make a conscious effort to learn and improve. And that's when I find that I am most inspired, is when I've really put some work into it. And it might not seem like it. And even if the end result isn't like frame worthy, it still takes a lot of effort to get these to look good. And so when I do photo sessions now, where I'm taking photos of a high school senior or a family or something like that, I'm drawing on all this experience. Just like when you shoot a wedding, you might make it look easy, but there's a ton going on. People are paying you because of what's going on in your mind, because
Yes.
you know exactly where to stand and what focal length to use and where the light's coming from, and what if you shoot at f4, that's going to be different than f2.8 or f1.4, whatever it is. And so all this work going on up here. So yeah, I think people will be surprised to know how much work actually goes on behind the scenes, particularly between the ears, when you see a good photo on Weekly 50 or anywhere. So,
Oh my gosh. Coming from
yeah.
your story of just seeing that first photo of your son just cruising along the couch, like, oh, this is
Yeah.
magic. The camera does it all. To hearing that aspect right there really ties this whole thing together.
Thank
And I
you.
don't think that we could end this on a better note than that. That was
Thank
fantastic.
you. Thank you. I'm glad to hear it. And that's what
Yeah.
I discovered when Kevin shot that photo. It was not magic. There was no secret sauce. There was just Kevin. He knew what he was doing, and he had a super basic camera. And if anyone out there is thinking about, like, maybe I should move up from my mobile phone, go to a used camera site, go to eBay and find something used. Don't spend more than like $200 or $300 on a used camera, used lens. And I promise you can make beautiful images with that, but it does take work. And learn over time, start shooting, and just make yourself do it repeatedly. Don't let it sit on your shelf, and you'll find yourself getting a lot better than you might realize. So it's not magic. It's just effort and knowing how it all works.
Perfect. I couldn't have said that better myself. Simon, I have to thank you so much for sharing everything that you did today. Before I let you go, can you let the listeners know where they can learn more about you and follow you along online?
Sure. So my website is weekly50.com. My YouTube channel is it's on the website. At the website, you can go to YouTube. And I'm on Instagram, and I post usually one a week, my weekly 50 photo. I'll just manually post that on Instagram when I see it on Wednesday morning. I don't have a weekly 50 Facebook. I'm on Facebook, but I'm not like friends with anyone. It's just like my actual friends and family. So you won't really find me on Facebook. And if you go to my actual personal website, sringsmuth.com, you'll see stuff that's way outdated. That's like my CV for my job. So Weekly 50 is probably the best place to go. And from there, you can get to other places if they want, if your listeners want. And I would love to have any of your listeners as followers, but mostly I would love it if any of your listeners took on a similar type of growth project, particularly a weekly photo, one a week. And at first, it's gonna seem so slow. Like, I'm so inspired. I want to post photos every day, 10 a day. Take it slow, one a week. because you can't maintain this like that initial rush. You can't maintain that over a year, 2 years, 5 years. You can maintain once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. So set those reasonable goals, and not you, but Raymond,
The
your
listeners.
will
Yeah.
you will absolutely
can-
learn and grow over time. And I think you'll be surprised at what you can come up with.
Perfect. Simon, again, man, thank you so much for coming on. I really do
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And
Thank
I
you,
look
Raymond.
forward
It's been
to following along on more Weekly 50. And I cannot wait to see you post the photo of the book that you print of your weekly
right.
photos.
All right. I will do it. Thank you, Raymond. I appreciate it.
I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Simon as much as I did. Simon was just a joy to chat with, and I really loved hearing his story. His journey was really interesting. I would love to know what your biggest takeaway is. What did you find interesting or inspiring about Simon's story? Be sure to share it in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. My biggest takeaway was just that Simon is doing all of this for the right reasons, honestly. He's not doing it for fame. He's not he knows that he doesn't want to go in business for himself. He likes his job. He just wants to learn photography, and he wants, a reason to be pushed and continually pushed forward. And that is why he started doing the website, and keeping up with it weekly. He doesn't care how many people come, because he just wants a reason to be pushed forward. And then also, just that inspiration takes work. When he said that, wow, inspiration takes work. Part of it is being in the right place at the right time, but part of it is putting yourself in a situation by working to get there that you're going to get that inspiration. And that really meant a lot to me. So again, I would love to hear what your biggest takeaway is. Be sure to share it in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. So that is it for this week. Remember to head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Click that banner up at the top to save your seat for next week's live webinar training, the 3 secrets to capturing better moments with the camera gear that you already have, and learn how to stop taking snapshots and start taking great shots. All right, until next week, I want you to make do. I want you to make more. I want you to do more. And I want you to make do with what you got, because I promise you it is better than you think. Stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.